I'm 17, pregnant and torn between fear and hope. Welcome back and enjoy the story. Jamie Bennett stared at the small plastic stick in her trembling hands, the two pink lines unmistakable against the white background. Her heart raced as she sat on the edge of the bathtub in her grandmother's modest home, the bathroom fan whirring overhead to mask any sounds of her quiet sobbing. At 17, with college applications scattered across her desk and dreams that stretched far beyond the boundaries of their small Chicago neighborhood, this wasn't part of the plan. No, 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 she whispered, her voice catching on each word. She closed her eyes, hoping that when she opened them again, one of the lines would have magically disappeared. But when she looked, they remained, bold, uncompromising, life-altering. Jamie had always been the responsible one, the girl with the color-coded planner and the clear 5-year plan. Graduate high school with honors, attend Northwestern University on scholarship, major in environmental science, and make a difference in the world. Now, in an instant, those carefully constructed plans seemed to crumble like a sandcastle against the rising tide. Her boyfriend, Keith Lewis, would be turning 19 soon. He worked for his father's construction company, making decent money for someone just out of high school. They'd been careful most of the time, but careful wasn't enough, apparently. The bathroom door rattled with a sharp knock. "Jamie, you've been in there for 20 minutes. Are you okay?" Her grandmother's concerned voice penetrated the thin wooden door. "I'm fine, Gran," Jamie called back, quickly wrapping the pregnancy test in toilet paper and burying it deep in the trash can. "Just girl stuff. I'll be out in a minute." She splashed cold water on her face, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The same hazel eyes looked back at her, but something had changed. There was a weight to her gaze now, a heaviness that hadn't been there yesterday. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her still flat stomach. "What am I going to do with you?" she whispered to her reflection, to the life growing inside her, to the universe that had thrown this monumental curveball. For a brief, luminous moment, she imagined holding a baby, her baby, with Keith's dimples and her curly hair. Then reality crashed back in. No job, no money, no experience, and no idea how to be a mother when she was barely past childhood herself. As she opened the bathroom door, her phone buzzed in her pocket. Keith's name flashed on the screen with a text. "Hey, beautiful, can't wait to see you tonight. Love you." Jamie took a deep breath. Tonight, she would tell him. Tonight, everything would change. The scent of marinara sauce greeted Jamie as she entered her grandmother's small kitchen. Eleanor Bennett, a spry woman in her 70s with silver hair always neatly pinned back, stood stirring a pot on the stove. "There you are. I was beginning to think you'd fallen in," Eleanor said with a chuckle, but her eyes narrowed slightly as she took in Jamie's pale face. "You feeling all right?" "Just tired," Jamie mumbled, slipping into a chair at the kitchen table. "Finals coming up and everything." Eleanor nodded, though her expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Keith coming for dinner?" "No, I'm meeting him later, at the pier." Jamie fidgeted with a loose thread on her sweater, avoiding her grandmother's perceptive gaze. "Well, you need to eat something first. You're looking peaky." Eleanor placed a bowl of spaghetti in front of her granddaughter. A girl needs her strength. Jamie stared at the food, her stomach churning with morning sickness that, ironically, lasted all day. She twirled pasta around her fork without enthusiasm, taking small bites to appease her grandmother. Eleanor sat across from her, watching with the quiet intensity that had always made Jamie feel like her grandmother could see right through her. Eleanor had raised Jamie since she was 8. After her mother, Eleanor's daughter, had died of cancer, and her father had disappeared into a haze of grief and alcohol. The arrangement had been meant to be temporary, but 9 years later it was the only real home Jamie knew. "Something on your mind?" Eleanor asked casually, too casually. Jamie shook her head quickly. "Just school stuff." Eleanor hummed, unconvinced. You know, when your mother was your age, she couldn't hide anything from me either. Had the same tell, that little wrinkle right between your eyebrows when you're worried about something big. Jamie's hand flew to her forehead instinctively, and Eleanor smiled. Whatever it is, Jamie girl, remember that problems shared are problems halved. The lump in Jamie's throat grew larger. If only it were that simple. Her grandmother had sacrificed so much to give her a stable home, to ensure she had opportunities her own mother never had. How could she tell her that she might have thrown it all away? Thanks, Gran, Jamie managed, rising from the table and kissing her grandmother's cheek. I should get ready to meet Keith. As she walked to her bedroom, Jamie could feel Eleanor's concerned gaze following her. Soon she would have to tell her grandmother everything, but first, Keith needed to know. They had created this situation together, and they would face it together, whatever it would ultimately be. Jamie's room was small but cozy, with lavender. Walls she and Eleanor had painted together when she was 12. College brochures and acceptance letters were pinned to a corkboard above her desk, visual reminders of the future she had planned so meticulously. Her eyes lingered on the Northwestern University pennant hanging above her bed. The environmental science program was everything she'd dreamed of, with internship opportunities that could lead to real change in climate policy. With a sigh, she opened her closet and pulled out a sweater and jeans. As she changed, she caught a glimpse of herself in the full-length mirror on her closet door. She turned sideways, running a hand over her stomach. Still flat, still the same. But nothing was the same, not really. Her phone buzzed again. Keith, at the pier, our usual spot. Jamie took a deep breath, grabbed her jacket, and headed for the door. The small velvet box tucked into her pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. A second pregnancy test she'd taken that morning, confirming what she already knew. Physical evidence she couldn't deny, couldn't rationalize away. Don't wait up, Gran, she called as she headed out. Be safe, Eleanor called back, those two simple words carrying more weight than her grandmother could possibly know. The spring evening was cool but not cold, the Chicago skyline glittering against the darkening sky as Jamie made her way to Navy Pier. Keith was waiting at their spot, a bench overlooking the water, his tall frame silhouetted against the lights of the Ferris wheel. He stood when he saw her, his face breaking into the smile that had first made her heart skip a beat nearly 2 years ago. "There's my girl," he said, wrapping her in a hug that smelled of sawdust and the cologne she'd given him for Christmas. "Missed you today." Jamie leaned into his embrace, trying to memorize the feeling of safety in his arms, afraid it might be the last time things felt this uncomplicated between them. "We need to talk," she said softly. The 4 words that had preceded countless breakups throughout human history. Keith pulled back slightly, his brow furrowing with concern. "That sounds serious. What's up?" Jamie sat on the bench and Keith joined her, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. In the distance, a boat horn sounded, and the Ferris wheel lights changed from blue to purple to pink. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words falling from her lips like stones into still water, creating ripples that would extend far beyond this moment. Keith's hands tightened around hers, his expression frozen. For several heartbeats he said nothing, and in that silence Jamie felt the full weight of her fear. Are you sure?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the pier. Jamie nodded, reaching into her pocket and pulling out the small velvet box. She opened it, revealing the pregnancy test nestled inside like some bizarre piece of jewelry. "I took another one this morning. It's positive too." Keith stared at the test, then back at Jamie's face. His eyes, usually so full of easy confidence, now swam with the same fear she felt. "Wow," he breathed. "Wow." "Yeah, Jamie agreed, a humorless laugh escaping her. Wow, pretty much covers it. What are you thinking? Keith asked cautiously, and Jamie could see him struggling to find the right words to be supportive without overstepping. I don't know, she admitted, and saying those 3 words aloud, she who always had a plan, always knew the next step, made the situation even more real. I haven't told Gran yet. You're the first to know. Keith nodded slowly, his gaze drifting out over the water as he processed. Jamie watched his profile, trying to read his thoughts in the set of his jaw, the slight furrow of his brow. Whatever you decide, he said finally, turning back to her with an intensity that took her breath away. I'm with you, 100%. This is our situation, not just yours. Relief flooded through Jamie, though it did little to dislodge the knot of anxiety in her chest. She had feared anger, denial, suggestions that she take care of it without further discussion. Keith's immediate solidarity was more than she had dared hope for. I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice small. There's college and your job, and we don't have money, and I'm only 17. Hey! Keith interrupted gently, pulling her close. We'll figure it out, one step at a time. Jamie rested her head against his shoulder, watching the lights of the city reflect off the dark water. In the distance, the Chicago skyline stood tall and unyielding, a reminder of how small they were in the grand scheme of things. Yet here, in this moment, they faced a decision that felt monumental, earth-shattering. I should have been more careful, Keith said after a long silence, guilt evident in his voice. We both should have, Jamie corrected him. This isn't on you any more than it's on me. They sat together as the night grew cooler, talking in circles, weighing options that all seemed impossible in their own ways. Abortion, adoption, keeping the baby. Each path forward came with its own set of challenges, its own potential for regret. My mum was adopted, you know, Jamie said quietly, and she always said it was hard for her, not knowing where she came from, feeling like she didn't belong. Keith nodded, absorbing this information. And how do you feel about the other option? Jamie sighed, staring at her hands. I've always believed in a woman's right to choose, always. But now that it's me, I don't know. It feels different. It's your body, Keith said carefully, but it's our baby. I wish I could help more, take some of this off your shoulders. The word baby hung in the air between them, making the abstract suddenly startlingly concrete. Not just a problem to solve, but a potential person with Keith's dimples and her curly hair. We should probably talk to our parents, Jamie said, reluctantly. Well, your parents and my grandmother. Keith winced slightly. My dad's going to freak out. He has all these plans for me to take over the business someday, go to community college for business administration. And my grandmother has been saving for my college fund since before I was born, Jamie added, the guilt intensifying. But they love us, Keith said with a conviction that Jamie envied. They'll help us figure this out. As they sat on the bench, a young family walked by, a mother and father each holding the hand of a toddler who was squealing with delight at the lights of the Ferris wheel. The parents looked tired but happy, exchanging loving glances over their child's head. Could that be us, Jamie wondered, trying to imagine herself and Keith in those roles. The thought was both terrifying and, surprisingly, not entirely unwelcome. Whatever happens, Keith said, following her gaze to the young family, we're in this together, I promise. As they walked hand in hand back toward the train station, the weight on Jamie's shoulders felt marginally lighter. The path forward was still shrouded in uncertainty, but at least she wouldn't be walking it alone. If you are enjoying the story, type 5 in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. The next morning, Jamie woke to the now familiar wave of nausea that had been her daily companion for the past week. She barely made it to the bathroom in time, emptying the meager contents of her stomach as quietly as possible to avoid alerting her grandmother. As she rinsed her mouth, she caught sight of herself in the mirror, pale with dark circles under her eyes. There would be no hiding this from Eleanor for much longer. Her grandmother was too perceptive, too attuned to the rhythms of Jamie's life. With a resigned sigh, Jamie shuffled back to her room and checked her phone. 3 texts from Keith. "Morning, hope you're feeling okay. Told my parents we need to have a family meeting tonight. Didn't say why. We'll get through this. Love you." Jamie smiled faintly at his messages. After their conversation at the pier, Keith had walked her home, both of them quiet, lost in their own thoughts about the future. Before saying goodnight, he had hugged her fiercely and promised again that they would face this together. It was a comfort, even as the practical obstacles loomed large in her mind. She texted back, "Morning sickness is real. Going to tell Gran today. Scared." His response came almost immediately. "Want me to be there?" Jamie considered the offer. Having Keith's support would help, but she also knew this was a conversation she needed to have one-on-one with the woman who had raised her. "Thanks, but I think I need to do this myself. Come by tonight." "Of course. Good luck. She loves you." Jamie set her phone down and got dressed, picking a loose sweater that had always been one of Eleanor's favorites. Small gestures of connection couldn't hurt before dropping a bombshell. In the kitchen, Eleanor was already up, reading the newspaper at the table with a cup of coffee. She looked up as Jamie entered, her keen eyes immediately assessing. "You look like you didn't sleep a wink," Eleanor observed, folding the newspaper. "Sit down. I'll make you some toast." "I'm not really hungry," Jamie began, but Eleanor was already up, dropping bread into the toaster. "Nonsense! You need to eat something. You're white as a sheet." Jamie sank into a chair, gathering her courage. There would never be a perfect moment for this conversation, but putting it off wouldn't make it any easier. "Gran," she started, her voice small, "I need to tell you something." Eleanor turned, butter knife in hand, her expression softening at Jamie's tone. "What is it, dear?" Jamie opened her mouth, but the words stuck in her throat. "How do you tell the person who sacrificed everything to give you opportunities that you might have thrown them all away?" Eleanor set the knife down and came to sit across from Jamie, reaching out to take her granddaughter's hands. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. That's what family does." The echo of Keith's words from the night before gave Jamie a flicker of hope. She took a deep breath and met her grandmother's eyes. "I'm pregnant," she said, the words hanging in the sunlit kitchen. Eleanor's hands tightened around Jamie's, but her expression remained carefully neutral. "I see," she said after a moment. "And you're sure?" Jamie nodded. 2 tests, both positive." The toaster popped, making them both jump slightly. Neither moved to retrieve the toast. "Keith knows?" Eleanor asked. "Yes, I told him last night." "And how did he take it?" "Better than I expected," Jamie admitted. "He says we're in it together, whatever I decide." Eleanor nodded slowly, processing. "That's something, at least. His parents? We're going to tell them tonight. He's already asked for a family meeting." Eleanor released Jamie's hands and stood, retrieving the toast and methodically spreading butter on it, her back to Jamie. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Gran," Jamie prompted, anxiety building, "please say something." Eleanor turned, placing the toast in front of Jamie. "Eat," she said firmly. "You need your strength now more than ever." Jamie picked up the toast obediently, taking a small bite, though her stomach protested. Eleanor sat back down, her face lined with concern, but not, Jamie was relieved to see, anger or disappointment. "How far along are you?" "I'm not sure. I missed my period in March, so maybe 6 or 7 weeks." Eleanor nodded. And have you thought about what you want to do? This was the question Jamie had been dreading, the one she had been asking herself over and over without finding an answer. I don't know, she admitted, setting the toast down. I know the logical thing would be to not keep it. I'm 17. I don't have a job. I'm supposed to start college in the fall. But, Eleanor prompted gently, but I can't stop thinking about it as a baby. Our baby. And I remember what Mom always said about being adopted, how hard it was. For her, Jamie's voice broke. I don't know what the right thing is, Gran. Eleanor reached across the table and took Jamie's hand again. There is no right answer here, Jamie girl. Only the answer that's right for you. Jamie looked up, surprised. She had expected a lecture, maybe even anger. You're not disappointed in me? Eleanor sighed deeply. Am I thrilled that my 17-year-old granddaughter is pregnant? No. But am I disappointed in you as a person? Never. I thought you'd tell me to get an abortion, Jamie admitted quietly. Would it surprise you to know that I was in your position once? Eleanor asked, her voice soft with memory. Jamie's eyes widened. What? When? I was 19, in my first year of nursing school. Your grandfather and I weren't married yet. Eleanor's gaze turned distant. It was 1966, and abortion wasn't legal then. Not that I would have chosen that anyway. So what did you do? A small, sad smile touched Eleanor's lips. We got married quickly, and I dropped out of nursing school. 9 months later, your Aunt Margaret was born. Jamie processed this revelation, this connection to her grandmother she'd never known existed. Do you regret it? Not finishing school? Eleanor considered the question carefully. I regret the timing, and sometimes I wonder what might have been if I'd been able to finish my education. But I have never, not for one moment, regretted my children, or you. The simple sincerity in her grandmother's voice brought tears to Jamie's eyes. The world is different now, Jamie, Eleanor continued. You have options I didn't have, and whatever you decide, I will support you. Jamie swallowed hard against the lump in her throat. Even if I decide to keep the baby? Even then, Eleanor assured her. It won't be easy, mind you, but nothing worth doing ever is. Jamie felt a weight lift from her shoulders, replaced by a new, more manageable kind of pressure, the pressure of making a decision that would shape the rest of her life, but with the knowledge that she wouldn't face it alone. Thank you, she whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Eleanor smiled, a touch of her usual practical nature returning. Now eat your toast, and then we should make you a doctor's appointment. Whatever you decide, you need proper care. Jamie picked up the toast again, finding that her appetite had returned slightly. As she ate, Eleanor began making a list. Doctor's appointments, prenatal vitamins, information about options, approaching the situation with the same methodical care she brought to everything. Keith is coming over tonight, Jamie said between bites. After they tell his parents, Eleanor nodded, adding family meeting with Keith to her list. Good. We all need to talk about this together. As Jamie watched her grandmother efficiently, organizing the chaos of her situation, a small flicker of hope kindled in her chest. There were still mountains to climb. Keith's parents' reactions, decisions about school, financial concerns. But for the first time since seeing those 2 pink lines, Jamie felt like she might actually have a path forward. The rest of the day passed in a blur of research and phone calls. Eleanor, drawing on her years of experience as a nurse before retirement, contacted an obstetrician colleague who agreed to see Jamie the following week. They also gathered information about Jamie's options, pamphlets about adoption agencies, details about abortion procedures, and resources for teen parents. By late afternoon, Jamie's head was spinning with information, and her anxiety about Keith's meeting with his parents had reached a fever pitch. She checked her phone obsessively, but there were no new messages. "Stop watching that phone," Eleanor admonished gently. It won't make time go any faster. Jamie sighed, setting the device down. What if his parents freak out? What if they blame me? What if they make him break up with me? Eleanor gave her a level look. Then we'll deal with that if it happens. But give them a chance, Jamie. Parents can surprise you. Before Jamie could respond, the doorbell rang, startling them both. She glanced at the clock. Only 5:30 p.m., earlier than Keith had said he would. Come. I'll get it, Eleanor said, rising from the couch where they had been reviewing information. Jamie's heart hammered as she heard the door open, then the murmur of voices in the entryway. A moment later, Eleanor returned to the living room, followed by Keith and his parents. Robert Lewis was a tall, broad-shouldered man with the same warm brown eyes as his son, though his were currently tight with tension. Diane Lewis, petite and blonde, had a pinched expression that made Jamie's stomach drop. "Hello, Jamie," Diane said stiffly, her usual warmth notably absent. "Hi, Mrs. Lewis." "Mr. Lewis," Jamie replied, her voice small. She looked at Keith questioningly. "They wanted to come over right away," Keith explained, his expression a mix of apology and defiance. "After I told them." An awkward silence fell over the room. Eleanor, ever the gracious hostess, stepped into the breach. "Why don't we all sit down? I just made a fresh pot of coffee." "I don't think this calls for coffee and pleasantries, Eleanor," Robert said gruffly. "Our children have created a serious problem." Eleanor's eyebrows rose slightly, but her voice remained calm. "I prefer to think of it as a challenging situation, Robert. But yes, it is serious, which is why we should discuss it calmly and rationally. Please sit." Something in Eleanor's tone, the nurse who had managed emergency rooms and difficult families, brooked no argument. The Lewises reluctantly took seats on the sofa, while Keith sat beside Jamie on the love seat, reaching for her, and supportively. "So," Eleanor began once everyone was settled, "we all know why we're here. Jamie is pregnant, and our children need our support while they figure out what to do next." "What to do next?" Diane repeated incredulously. "They're children themselves. There's only one sensible option here." Jamie felt Keith tense beside her, his hand tightening around hers. "Mom," he said firmly, "we haven't decided anything yet, and it's not just your decision to make." "You're 18, Keith," Robert interjected. "You have your whole life ahead of you, a construction career with the company, community college in the fall." "I know, Dad," Keith interrupted, "and Jamie has college plans too. We're not ignoring those things." "Then you understand why this pregnancy can't continue," Diane said, as if the matter were settled. Jamie found her voice, small but determined. "With all due respect, Mrs. Lewis, that's not a decision we've made yet." Diane turned to her, eyes flashing. "You expect my son to throw away his future for a mistake?" "That's enough, Diane," Eleanor said sharply. "We're talking about my granddaughter and your potential grandchild, not a mistake." The tension in the room was palpable. Robert ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so like Keith's that it momentarily distracted Jamie from her anxiety. "Look," Robert said, his voice slightly calmer, "we're just concerned about their futures. They're so young." "We're aware of that," Eleanor acknowledged, "but they're also almost adults, capable of making difficult decisions with proper support and guidance, which is what we should be offering them." Keith straightened beside Jamie, his expression resolute. "We appreciate your concern, both of you, but this is ultimately our decision to make, and we're still figuring out what that decision is." Jamie nodded, drawing strength from Keith's steadfastness. "We know this isn't ideal timing. We know there are huge challenges ahead, whatever we decide, but we need you to respect that this is our situation to navigate." A heavy silence fell over the room. Diane looked away, blinking rapidly, while Robert stared at his son with a mixture of frustration and grudging respect. "Have you seen a doctor yet?" Robert finally asked, his tone marginally softer. "We have an appointment next week," Eleanor answered, "with a colleague of mine." "And you've Considered all options? Diane asked carefully, looking at Jamie. Jamie nodded. We're still considering them, all of them. Another stretch of silence, less hostile this time, more contemplative. Whatever you decide, Robert said finally, his voice gruff with emotion. You won't be doing it alone. That's not how our family works. Diane nodded reluctantly, reaching for her husband's hand. We just want what's best for you both. We know that, Keith said softly, and we're trying to figure out what that is. As the evening progressed, the initial tension gradually eased. They didn't reach any conclusions or make any decisions, but by the time the Lewises left, there was a tentative truce, an acknowledgement that whatever path forward they chose, they would navigate it as a family, complicated, imperfect, but united. After Keith and his parents left, with promises to continue the conversation after Jamie's doctor's appointment, she collapsed on the couch beside her grandmother, emotionally drained. That went better than I expected, Eleanor observed, patting Jamie's knee. Jamie let out a humorless laugh. Really, because it felt pretty awful to me. They showed up, didn't they? They're scared and concerned, just like you are, but they're here in the trenches with us. That counts for something. Jamie considered this perspective, finding truth in it despite her lingering anxiety. Do you think we can really do this? Gran, if we decide to keep the baby, I mean. Eleanor looked at her thoughtfully. I think you can do anything you set your mind to, Jamie Bennett. It won't be easy or straightforward. Your path might look different than you imagined. But yes, I think you can do this, if that's what you choose. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, Jamie felt a flicker of something beyond. Fear or confusion, something that felt almost like hope. Remember the beginning of our journey together, the moment Jamie first saw those two pink lines that changed everything? We've now witnessed her initial shock, her conversation with Keith at the pier, and the tense but ultimately supportive family meeting. As Jamie begins to consider that there might be a way forward, whatever she decides, we stand at a critical juncture in her story. What will the doctor's appointment reveal? How will this pregnancy affect her college plans? Can Keith truly step up as he's promised? The road ahead is uncertain, but one thing is becoming clear. Jamie won't have to walk it alone. The week dragged by with agonizing slowness, each day bringing new waves of morning sickness and anxiety for Jamie. Keith texted constantly, checking in on her, sharing links to pregnancy websites and relaying small bits of encouragement from his mother, who seemed to be gradually warming to their situation. Mum found some of my baby clothes in the attic, one text read. Says she saved everything, just in case we need it. The subtle shift from if you keep it to in case we need it wasn't lost on Jamie. The possibility of this pregnancy resulting in an actual baby, their baby, was becoming more real by the day. At school, Jamie moved through her classes in a fog, struggling to focus on calculus problems and English essays when her mind was consumed with life-altering decisions. Her friends noticed her distraction, but attributed it to senior year stress and college decisions. Only her closest friend, Zoe, sensed something more significant was happening. Okay, spill it, Zoe demanded during lunch on Thursday, sliding into the seat across from Jamie in the cafeteria. You've been a zombie all week. What's going on? Jamie poked at her salad, avoiding Zoe's penetrating gaze. Just tired. Lot on my mind with graduation coming up. Bull, Zoe said flatly. We've been friends since 6th grade, Jamie Bennett. I know when you're hiding something big. Jamie glanced around the crowded cafeteria, then back at her friend's concerned face. Zoe had been there through everything. Her mother's death, her father's abandonment, every triumph and heartbreak since. If anyone deserved the truth, it was her. Not here, Jamie said quietly. Meet me at my locker after last period. Zoe nodded, her expression softening. Whatever it is, Jay, you know I've got your back, right? Jamie managed a small smile. I know. Later, as the final bell rang and students flooded the hallways, eager for the weekend, Jamie waited at her locker, anxiety churning in her stomach. When Zoe appeared, linking her arm through Jamie's, they walked silently to the empty music room, their unofficial sanctuary since freshman year. Once the door closed behind them, Jamie sat heavily on the piano bench, and Zoe perched on a nearby chair, waiting patiently. "I'm pregnant," Jamie said finally, the words feeling both foreign and painfully familiar by now. Zoe's eyes widened, but to her credit she didn't gasp or overreact. "Wow," she said softly, "that's a lot. How far along?" "About 7 weeks, I think. Doctor's appointment is tomorrow." "And Keith?" "He's been amazing," Jamie admitted. "Way more supportive than I expected. His parents freaked out at first, but they're coming around. And Gran has been incredible." Zoe nodded, processing. "Have you decided what you're going to do?" Jamie shook her head, staring at the black and white piano keys. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Every option feels impossible in its own way." "But you're leaning one way or the other," Zoe prompted gently. Jamie sighed, finally putting into words the feeling that had been growing stronger with each passing day. I think I might want to keep it." "Which is crazy, right? I'm 17, I don't have a job, I'm supposed to start college in a few months." "It's not crazy," Zoe said firmly. "Difficult, sure, but not crazy. Northwestern has already accepted me. Full scholarship," Jamie reminded her, as if Zoe could have forgotten this crucial detail. "I'd have to defer at least a year, maybe longer. And what about money, and where would we live, and how would I finish school with a baby?" Zoe reached out, taking Jamie's hands in hers. "One problem at a time, Jay. First, you see the doctor tomorrow. Then you make the big decision. Then you tackle each of those questions one by one." The simple, practical approach, so characteristic of Zoe, helped center Jamie, bringing the swirling chaos of her thoughts into something more manageable. "If you do keep the baby," Zoe continued, "you know I'm going to be the world's most awesome honorary aunt, right? I'll babysit, bring diapers, the whole deal." Jamie laughed, a genuine laugh that felt like the first breath of air after being underwater. "Are you adding teen mom support system to your already packed college prep schedule?" "Hey, what are best friends for?" Zoe grinned, then grew serious again. "Whatever you decide, Jay, I'm here. No judgment, just support." "Thanks, Z," Jamie said softly, feeling a new thread of strength weaving into the fragile web of her support system. "That means more than you know." The next morning, Jamie sat nervously in the waiting room of Dr. Susan Chen's obstetrics practice, Keith beside her and Eleanor across from them, flipping through a parenting magazine with forced casualness. The waiting room was filled with women in various stages of pregnancy, some alone, some with partners, all seeming far more prepared for motherhood than Jamie felt. "Miss Bennett?" A nurse in blue scrubs appeared at the door, clipboard in hand. Jamie stood, her legs shaky. Keith rose with her, his hand firmly holding hers. "Just Jamie and myself for this first part," Eleanor said to Keith, patting his arm reassuringly. "We'll call you in shortly." Keith nodded, reluctantly releasing Jamie's hand. "I'll be right here." The examination was thorough and clinical. Dr. Chen, a petite woman with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, asked detailed questions about Jamie's medical history, her symptoms, her cycle. "Based on your last period, you're about 7 weeks along," Dr. Chen confirmed, making notes in Jamie's chart. "Now, I'd like to do an ultrasound to verify that and make sure everything is developing properly." Jamie nodded, looking nervously at her grandmother, who gave her an encouraging smile. "Should we get Keith for this part?" Eleanor asked. "If you'd like him to be present, absolutely," Dr. Chen agreed. Minutes later, Keith sat beside Jamie, holding her hand tightly as Dr. Chen spread cold gel on Jamie's still flat stomach. The room was quiet, except for the soft whirring of the ultrasound machine. "There we are," Dr. Chen said, turning the screen slightly so they could all see. "That small, flickering light, that's your baby's heartbeat." Jamie stared at the screen, at the tiny pulsing spot that somehow, impossibly, was a life growing inside her. Keith's hand tightened around hers, and when she glanced at him, she saw tears in his eyes. "Our baby," he whispered, voice filled with wonder. Eleanor stood behind them, one hand on Jamie's shoulder, her expression a complex mixture of concern and pride. "Everything looks normal," Dr. Chen continued, taking measurements. "The fetus is developing as expected at 7 weeks. I'm going to print some pictures for you to take home." As Dr. Chen cleaned the gel from Jamie's stomach and prepared the ultrasound photos, she addressed the elephant in the room with gentle directness. "I understand you're still considering your options," she said, her tone free of judgment. "Given how far along you are, you have some time to make that decision, but not unlimited time. If you decide to terminate, it would ideally be done before 12 weeks. Jamie nodded, the reality of the ticking clock adding new pressure. "And if I decide to continue the pregnancy?" she asked, her voice small. "Then we'll develop a comprehensive prenatal care plan," Dr. Chen replied. "Given your age and circumstances, we'll want to monitor you closely, but there's no reason you can't have a healthy pregnancy and delivery." As they left the examination room with ultrasound photos and a folder full of information, Jamie felt simultaneously more certain and more confused than ever. The flickering heartbeat had changed something in her, made the abstract suddenly, undeniably real. In the car ride home, the three of them were mostly silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Keith held the ultrasound photo carefully, as if it were made of the most delicate glass. "It's so tiny," he said finally, breaking the silence, "but it already has a heartbeat." "The human body is remarkable," Eleanor commented from the driver's seat. "We start as just a collection of cells, and then suddenly there's a heart beating." Jamie stared out the window, watching the familiar Chicago neighborhoods pass by. "It makes the decision harder," she admitted. "Seeing it, hearing the heartbeat." Keith reached for her hand. "We still have time. We don't have to decide today." But as the days passed, the decision loomed larger. Jamie met with her guidance counselor to discreetly discuss options for deferring her Northwestern scholarship, just in case. Keith had conversations with his father about possibly increasing his hours at the construction company to save more money. Eleanor researched health insurance options for Jamie and the baby, if they chose to continue the pregnancy. Every morning, Jamie woke with the same questions circling in her mind. Could they really do this? Was she prepared to become a mother at 18? Would she be throwing away her future? Or would she be creating a different future, one she hadn't planned, but might be equally meaningful? A week after the doctor's appointment, Jamie sat at her desk, college brochures spread before her, her Northwestern acceptance letter prominently displayed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Keith. "Thinking about you. Dad offered me full-time position after graduation, more money, benefits." Jamie smiled faintly. Keith was planning, preparing, stepping up in ways that touched her deeply. But was it enough? Could love and good intentions overcome the practical challenges of teen parenthood? She picked up the ultrasound photo, now magnetized to her desk lamp, the tiny bean-shaped blur with its flickering heartbeat. Their baby. "Jamie," Eleanor's voice called from the hallway, "you have visitors." Puzzled, Jamie set down the photo and went to the living room, where she found not only Keith, but also his parents sitting somewhat stiffly on the sofa. "What's going on?" she asked, immediately on guard. The last family meeting hadn't exactly been pleasant. "We wanted to talk to you both," Robert Lewis said. His usual gruff manner softened slightly. "About some ideas we've been discussing." Jamie sat beside Keith on the love seat, while Eleanor took her customary armchair, her expression curious but cautious. "Go ahead," Keith encouraged his father. Robert cleared his throat. "We've been thinking a lot about your situation. And while it's not what any of us would have chosen for you at this age, we want to offer our support, whatever you decide." Jamie blinked in surprise, glancing at Diane, whose expression had shifted from the pinched disapproval of their last meeting to something more resigned, but not unkind. "We have the apartment over our garage," Diane continued, taking up where Robert left off. "It's small, just a one-bedroom, but it's private, and it's been sitting empty since Keith's cousin moved out last year. If you decide to keep the baby, it's yours, rent-free, at least until you get on your feet." Keith's hand found Jamie's, squeezing tightly. She could feel his surprise matching her own. "That's incredibly generous," Eleanor said, when Jamie couldn't find her voice. "There are conditions," Robert added quickly. "Both of you finish high school. Keith continues working full-time for the company. And Jamie, you'd need to find part-time work or schooling once the baby is old enough. And we'd help with childcare," Diane added, her voice softening further. "I'm home most days and, well, I was a young mother myself once. I know how hard it can be." Jamie felt tears pricking at her eyes. The offer was unexpected, a lifeline thrown when she'd been drowning in uncertainty. "We haven't decided yet," she said carefully, not wanting to presume. "About keeping the baby, I mean." "We know," Robert nodded. "But we wanted you to know that if that's your decision, you won't be doing it alone. We'll help make it work." Keith's grip on her hand tightened, and when Jamie looked at him, she saw his eyes shining with barely contained emotion. "Thank you," he said to his parents, his voice thick. "This means everything." As the Lewises left, promising to continue the conversation after Jamie and Keith had time to process the offer, a new possibility began to take shape in Jamie's mind. A tiny apartment over a garage, a baby in a crib beside their bed. Morning. Classes at the community college, while Diane watched the baby. Keith coming home from work, tired but proud to be providing for his family. It wasn't the future she had planned, not Northwestern University and environmental science and changing the world, but it was a future, one with challenges, certainly, but also with love, support, and the possibility of joy. That night, Jamie lay in bed, one hand resting on her stomach, imagining the tiny heart beating beneath her palm. For the first time, she allowed herself to really envision it, holding her baby, watching it grow, being a mother. The fear was still there, a constant companion. But now there was something else too, something that felt suspiciously like hope. The next morning, Jamie woke early, a sense of purpose propelling her from bed despite the lingering nausea. She dressed quickly and went to the kitchen, where Eleanor was already up, coffee in hand, reading the newspaper. "You're up early for a Saturday," Eleanor observed, setting down her paper. Jamie nodded, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "One of the few things that settled her queasy stomach. I've been thinking a lot." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I think I want to keep the baby," Jamie said, the words sending a shiver through her, fear and determination intertwined. Eleanor studied her granddaughter's face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be," Jamie replied honestly. "It's terrifying, and I know it will change everything, but I want this baby, our baby." Eleanor reached across the table, taking Jamie's hand. "Then we'll make it work. Somehow, we'll make it work." Jamie squeezed her grandmother's hand gratefully. "The Lewises' offer helps a lot, but I still want to go to college, Gran. Maybe not Northwestern, not right away, but I don't want to give up on my education." "Of course not," Eleanor agreed, firmly, There are options, community college nearby, online courses, part-time programs. We'll figure it out. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of planning and phone calls. Jamie called Keith first, her heart racing as she told him her decision. "I want to keep our baby," she said simply, and the joy in his voice as he responded brought fresh tears to her eyes. "Me too," he said, the words exhaled like a long-held breath. "I've been hoping that's what you'd decide, but I didn't want to pressure you." Next came calls to Dr. Chen's office to schedule prenatal appointments, to Northwestern, to inquire about deferment policies, to Zoe to share the news. By evening, Jamie felt both exhausted and exhilarated, as if she had jumped off a cliff and was still falling, uncertain of where she would land, but committed to the journey. That night, Keith came over with a small wrapped package. They sat on the porch swing, the spring evening mild around them, as Jamie carefully opened it. Inside was a tiny pair of baby booties, crocheted in soft yellow yarn. "My mom made them," Keith explained, a flush creeping up his neck. "She said yellow works for a boy or a girl." Jamie ran her finger over the delicate stitches, touched beyond words at this tangible symbol of acceptance from Diane Lewis, who just 2 weeks ago had been advocating for termination. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "So we're really doing this?" Keith asked, his voice a mixture of nervousness and excitement. "We're having a baby?" Jamie nodded, leaning against his shoulder. "We're having a baby." The decision made. A new kind of anxiety took hold, not the paralyzing fear of before, but the more focused worry of specific challenges. How would they afford everything a baby needed? Would Jamie be able to handle the physical demands of pregnancy while finishing high school? Could they be good parents when they were barely adults themselves? But alongside these worries grew a cautious optimism. Each small step forward, the Lewises cleaning out the garage apartment, Eleanor bringing down Jamie's old crib from the attic, Zoe organizing a small baby shower for after graduation, built a foundation of support that made the impossible seem increasingly possible. At school, as Jamie's first trimester ended and her morning sickness finally began to subside, she made the decision to tell her teachers. Their reactions varied from barely concealed disapproval to surprising warmth, but all committed to helping her complete her senior year successfully. "You're not the first pregnant student I've taught, and you won't be the last," Mrs. Rodriguez, her calculus teacher, said matter-of-factly. "Your brain still works fine, even if your body is busy making a human. Let's get you that A so you can keep your scholarship options open." With her secret now in the open, Jamie found unexpected allies throughout the school. The guidance counselor helped arrange for her to take her final exams early, just in case. The school nurse kept crackers and ginger ale in her office for Jamie's occasional bouts of nausea. Even the principal, a stern woman not known for flexibility, granted Jamie permission to leave class whenever needed for doctor's appointments. By the time graduation approached in late May, Jamie was nearly 4 months pregnant, her baby bump just beginning to show beneath her flowing sundresses. Keith's graduation ceremony at a different high school across town had been the week before, and he had proudly accepted his diploma with his parents and Jamie cheering from the audience. Now it was Jamie's turn, and as she donned her blue cap and gown, she felt a strange mixture of accomplishment and trepidation. One chapter of her life was ending, just as a completely unexpected one was beginning. "You look beautiful," Eleanor said, adjusting Jamie's cap in the kitchen before they left for the ceremony. "I am so proud of you, Jamie girl, so proud." Jamie hugged her grandmother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of lavender perfume. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Gran." "Nonsense," Eleanor said briskly, though her eyes were suspiciously bright. "You're the strongest person I know, just like your mother." The mention of her mother, gone now for nearly a decade, brought a bittersweet pang. What would her mother think of her situation? Would she be disappointed, supportive, a mixture? Of both, like everyone else in Jamie's life. Mum would have loved being a grandmother, Jamie said softly, even if it happened sooner than anyone expected. Eleanor smiled, touching Jamie's cheek gently. She would have been as proud of you as I am. Now let's go get that diploma. Your future is waiting. Have you or someone you know ever faced a life-changing decision that seemed impossible at first? How did they find their way through it? Share your experience in the comments below. The graduation ceremony was a blur of speeches, music, and the rhythmic calling of names. When Jamie Bennett echoed through the auditorium, the cheers from her small but devoted cheering section, Eleanor, Keith, the Lewises, and Zoe with her family, brought a flush of pride to Jamie's cheeks as she crossed the stage to accept her diploma. Afterward, as families mingled on the school lawn taking photos, Jamie found herself surrounded by her unusual but steadfast support system. Keith's arm wrapped protectively around her waist, his parents beaming with a pride that extended beyond their own son to include her now. Eleanor, dabbing at tears while simultaneously organizing everyone for photos. Zoe, vibrant and chattering about the small graduation party they were hosting at Eleanor's house afterward. "How are you feeling?" Keith asked quietly during a moment. Alone, his hand gently touching her small bump. "Tired," Jamie admitted, "but good, really good." And it was true. Despite the morning sickness that still occasionally plagued her, despite the aches and strange food cravings and constant need to pee, despite all the uncertainty that still lay ahead, Jamie felt a growing sense of peace with her decision. The summer stretched before them, a brief interlude before everything would change again. Keith had already started working full-time for his father, coming home exhausted but proud of the steady paycheck and the benefits package that would cover both Jamie and the baby. Jamie had secured a part-time job at the local library, shelving books and helping with children's story time 3 mornings a week, work that was neither physically demanding nor stressful, perfect for her advancing pregnancy. In July, they moved into the apartment above the Lewis's garage. It was small, as Diane had warned, but freshly painted and filled with a mix of hand-me-down and carefully purchased furniture. Their bedroom just fit a queen-sized bed and the white crib that had once been Jamie's. The living room doubled as a dining area and study space, with a folding table where Jamie could do coursework for the online classes she'd enrolled in for the fall semester. It wasn't the college dormitory Jamie had once envisioned for herself, but as she arranged her books on a small shelf and hung photos on the walls, she felt a profound sense of ownership. This was their home, hers, Keith's, and their babies. Their first home as a family. "What do you think?" Keith asked anxiously as they stood in the middle of the living room on moving day, surrounded by boxes yet to be unpacked. Jamie turned slowly, taking in the space. The slightly worn couch that had been in the Lewis's basement. The rocking chair that Eleanor had insisted they take. The small table with its mismatched chairs. The window that looked out over the leafy backyard. "I think it's perfect," she said, meaning it. Keith's face broke into a relieved smile. "Really? I know it's not much." "It's ours," Jamie said simply, wrapping her arms around him. "That makes it perfect." As July turned to August, the heat of the Chicago summer became increasingly uncomfortable for Jamie, now visibly pregnant at 6 months. Her ankles swelled. Her back ached constantly, and sleeping became an elaborate arrangement of pillows and position changes. But there were moments of pure joy, too. The first definitive kick that made both Jamie and Keith gasp in wonder. The ultrasound that revealed they were having a girl. The quiet evenings on the small balcony outside their apartment, watching fireflies and talking about names. "I still like Lily," Keith said one such evening, his hand resting on Jamie's rounded belly. "Lily Lewis sounds nice." Jamie smiled, covering his hand with hers. "I like Lily too. What about Lily Eleanor after Gran?" Keith nodded approvingly. "Lily Eleanor Lewis. It has a good ring to it." As they sat together in the gathering twilight, discussing middle names and nursery colours and whether their daughter would have Keith's dimples or Jamie's curly hair, the future that had once seemed so terrifying now felt, if not easy, at least navigable. There would be challenges, certainly. Money would be tight, sleep would be scarce. Balancing parenthood with education and work would require constant juggling and compromise. But they weren't facing it alone. The network of support around them had only grown stronger over the months. Eleanor came over every Sunday for dinner, always bringing some small gift for the baby or a homemade casserole for the freezer. Diane, whose initial disapproval had transformed into enthusiastic grandmotherly anticipation, had started knitting a blanket in soft pink yarn. Robert, gruff as ever, had nevertheless spent a weekend installing bookshelves and a changing table in the corner of their bedroom that would serve as the nursery area. Even Jamie's father, absent for most of her adolescence, had resurfaced after hearing the news from Eleanor. He was sober now, living in Milwaukee with a new wife, his tentative phone calls evolving into occasional visits, each one less awkward than the last. "I wasn't there for you," he'd said during his most recent visit, his eyes sad but clear. "Let me try to be there for my granddaughter." To her surprise, Jamie found herself willing to give him that chance, sensing that something about her pregnancy, about her own impending parenthood, had catalyzed a healing that she hadn't known she needed. September brought the start of Jamie's online courses, 2 classes that would count toward her environmental science degree, structured to allow her to complete the coursework around her pregnancy and eventually early motherhood. The classes were challenging but engaging, and Jamie threw herself into the work with the same dedication she'd always shown, determined to prove that motherhood wouldn't be the end of her educational ambitions. Keith, seeing her determination, began researching night classes at the community college for the business administration courses his father had always encouraged. "If I'm going to run the company someday," he explained, when Jamie found him poring over course catalogues late one night, "I should have the education to back it up." Watching him plan for their future, for their daughter's future, Jamie felt a surge of love and gratitude. They had both grown up so much in the past 6 months, forced to mature by circumstances, but rising to the challenge in ways neither could have predicted. As October arrived and Jamie's due date approached, the final preparations took on an urgency that was both exciting and nerve-wracking. The hospital bag was packed and repacked. The car seat was installed in Keith's used Honda, which his parents had helped them buy for greater reliability. Diapers were stacked in the bathroom cupboard, tiny clothes washed and folded in dresser drawers. "Are we ready for this?" Jamie asked one night, unable to find a comfortable position in bed, her question encompassing far more than just the physical preparations. Keith propped himself up on one elbow, looking at her with a seriousness that had become more common as the reality of impending fatherhood set in. "Honestly, I don't think anyone's ever completely ready, but we've done everything we can to prepare, and we have people who love us, who will help us figure out the rest." Jamie nodded, feeling the truth of his words. They had done everything possible to prepare for the practical aspects of parenthood, the emotional aspects, the love, the fear, the overwhelming responsibility, those they would have to navigate day by day, moment by moment. "I love you," she said simply. "Whatever happens, whatever challenges come, I'm glad we're facing them together." Heath leaned over to kiss her softly. "Me too. Now try to get some sleep. Our daughter needs her rest." But sleep remained elusive as Jamie's thoughts continued to wander. She thought of the path that had brought her here, the shock and fear of those first positive pregnancy tests, the agonizing decision-making process, the gradual building of a future she had never planned but now embraced wholeheartedly. She thought of her grandmother's unwavering support, of the Lewis's evolution from shocked and disapproving to enthusiastic grandparents-to-be, of Zoe's steadfast friendship, of her father's tentative return to her life. And she thought of her mother, gone too soon, but present in so many ways in the family Jamie was creating. Would her mother be proud of the choices Jamie had made? Would she approve of the path her daughter had chosen? As if in answer, the baby kicked vigorously, causing Jamie to laugh softly in the darkness. "I think that's a yes," she whispered, rubbing the spot where her daughter's foot or elbow had protruded. "I think she would have loved you very much, and I promise I'll tell you all about her someday." With that thought providing comfort, Jamie finally drifted off to sleep, one hand resting protectively on her belly, the future no longer a source of fear, but of precious, hard-won hope. What will happen next in Jamie's journey? Will the birth go smoothly? How will she and Keith adapt to the reality of parenthood? Will Jamie be able to continue her education while raising a child? The stakes are high, but with their growing support system and their love for each other and their unborn daughter, they face the future with cautious optimism and newfound strength. Lily Eleanor Lewis made her entrance into the world on a crisp October morning, after 26 hours of labor that tested Jamie's endurance in ways she had never imagined possible. But when the doctor finally placed the squalling, red-faced infant on Jamie's chest, the exhaustion seemed to evaporate, replaced by a love so fierce and immediate that it took her breath away. "She's perfect," Keith whispered, tears streaming unashamedly down his face as he gently touched his daughter's tiny hand. "Jamie, she's absolutely perfect." And she was. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of perfection, with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that, when briefly open, seemed to hold all the wisdom of the universe. The first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and the strange new rhythm of life dictated by a newborn's needs. Jamie and Keith took turns walking the floor with Lily at 3 a.m., both of them stumbling through days on minimal sleep, learning through trial and error the unique language of their daughter's cries. But there were moments of transcendent joy, too. Lily's first real smile at 3 weeks, the way she would calm instantly when Keith sang to her, the peaceful weight of her sleeping in Jamie's arms. Eleanor practically moved in for the first 2 weeks, cooking meals, doing laundry, and most importantly, giving the new parents a chance to shower and occasionally nap. Diane was a constant presence as well, always ready to take the baby so Jamie could work on her online coursework or simply have a moment to herself. "It really does take a village," Jamie commented one afternoon, watching as Eleanor and Diane, now surprisingly friendly after their initial frosty interactions, cooed over Lily, while Jamie attempted to complete an assignment for her environmental policy class. "And we have a pretty good village," Keith agreed, looking up from his own textbook. He had started night classes at the community college 2 evenings a week, with Jamie's enthusiastic support. By Christmas, they had settled into something resembling a routine. Lily, now 2 months old, was sleeping for slightly longer stretches, and Jamie had successfully completed her first semester of online courses. The tiny apartment was decorated with a small tree and homemade ornaments, and presents for Lily, far more than one baby could possibly need, were piled beneath it. Gifts from grandparents, great-grandparents, honorary aunts and uncles, and friends who had become like family. On Christmas Eve, as they gathered in the Lewis's main house for dinner, a tradition that now included Eleanor and, somewhat awkwardly but increasingly comfortably, Jamie's father and his new wife, Jamie looked around the table at the unlikely family they had created. Robert Lewis, carving the turkey with ceremonial precision. Diane, arranging Lily's new Christmas outfit for a photo. Eleanor, deep in conversation with Jamie's stepmother about a recipe. Jamie's father, watching Lily with a mixture of wonder and regret for all he had missed with his own daughter. Keith, catching Jamie's eye across the table with a smile that still made her heart skip. These people, bound together not just by blood or marriage, but by love and choice, and the tiny girl currently sleeping in her carrier, were the foundation on which Jamie and Keith were building their new life. It wasn't the life Jamie had planned, but standing in the warm kitchen, surrounded by family, Lily's soft weight against her chest, she couldn't imagine wanting anything different. As winter deepened and Lily grew, gaining weight and personality, with each passing week, Jamie found herself settling into motherhood with a confidence she hadn't expected. The terror of those early weeks, the constant fear that she would somehow break this fragile new being, had given way to a deeper understanding of her daughter's needs and rhythms. She had also returned to her studies with renewed focus, often reading her environmental science textbooks aloud to Lily during late-night feedings. "This is for you," she would whisper to her daughter, "so you'll have a healthier planet when you grow up." Keith, too, had found his stride, balancing full-time work with his night classes and fatherhood. He had a natural patience with Lily that Jamie sometimes envied, able to soothe their daughter through her fussiest moments with a calm that belied his youth. When spring arrived, bringing with it Lily's first smiles and laughs, it also brought news from Northwestern University. Jamie's scholarship could be deferred for up to 2 years, but she would need to reapply after that. It wasn't ideal, but it was a pathway back to her original dream, now expanded to include her daughter and Keith. "Do you think we could do it?" she asked Keith one evening as they sat on their small balcony watching the sunset, Lily asleep in her bouncer between them. "Move to Evanston when Lily's a little older, find an apartment near campus?" Keith considered the question seriously, as he did all decisions that affected their family. "It would be harder without our parents nearby to help. But if that's what you want, Jamie, we'll find a way." Jamie reached for his hand, feeling the calluses from his construction work, the strength that had become her anchor. "It's something to think about. For now, the online classes are working well with Lily's schedule, and your job is good." "We have time," Keith assured her, "to figure out what's best for all of us." Time, that was the gift they had given themselves by choosing this path. Time to grow as individuals and as a family, to make decisions thoughtfully rather than rushing from crisis to crisis. Time to watch their daughter develop, to strengthen their relationship, to build a future with solid foundations rather than precarious hopes. As Lily's first birthday approached, bringing with it wobbly first steps and a vocabulary that consisted mainly of mama, dada, and enthusiastic babbling, Jamie reflected on the year that had passed since her graduation. It had been the hardest year of her life in many ways, physically demanding, emotionally draining, financially stressful. But it had also been the most profound. She had discovered strength she hadn't known she possessed, a capacity for love beyond anything she had imagined, and a resilience that would serve her for the rest of her life. The decision she had made to keep her baby despite the enormous challenges had not been the easy choice. There were still days when she looked at friends from high school posting about college parties and study abroad programs and felt a pang of what might have been. But then Lily would toddle over to her, arms raised in a clear demand to be picked up, and Jamie would lift her daughter, breathing in the sweet scent of baby shampoo and feeling the solid weight of her against her chest, and she would know with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice. Not the only right choice. There were many paths to a fulfilling life, but the right choice for her. On the morning of Lily's first birthday, as Jamie frosted a small cake while Keith decorated their apartment with balloons and streamers, she paused to watch her daughter playing on the living room floor, stacking blocks with a concentration that mirrored her father's when he was focused on a task. "Happy birthday, my love," Jamie said softly. Lily looked up at the sound of her mother's voice, her face breaking into a gummy smile that illuminated the room. And in that smile, Jamie saw the future stretching before them, school plays and science projects, skinned knees and bedtime stories, challenges and triumphs, and all the beautiful, ordinary moments that made up a life. It wouldn't be easy. There would be financial struggles and logistical challenges, moments of doubt and exhaustion. But they had built a foundation of love and support, a network of people who believed in them and their little family. And they had each other, Jamie, Keith, and Lily. Three hearts bound together by love and choice, navigating an unexpected path that had led them to exactly where they were meant to be. Congratulations, type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.